Indiana Newsdesk is made possible in part by Hoosier Energy, providing electricity to southern and central Indiana electric cooperatives and their member customers. Information at hepn.com. And by WTIU members. Thank you.
Right now on Indiana Newsdesk, university professors and students around the state organized Howard Zinn read-ins this week. How the debate over the liberal historian's work raises questions about who decides what's taught in Indiana's classrooms.
Academic freedom says it's the obligation of the person who is teaching to decide ethically what is appropriate and not appropriate.
A study shows Indiana girls lead their male peers in science and math until they get to high school. Why do they start lagging behind?
Do girls know what jobs are out there when they have an interest and background in math and science? They're not exposed to TV, cartoons, or media that allows them to know what they could do with an engineering career.
Plus, it's an issue we've been following closely, the power struggle between the State Board of Education and the top school's chief. Will Superintendent Glenda Ritz get to move ahead with her lawsuit? We'll have more in our State Impact Report. Those stories and a look at this week's headlines right now on Indiana Newsdesk. Hello, I'm Joe Wren and welcome to Indiana Newsdesk. At universities across the state this week, groups honored liberal historian Howard Zinn. At Purdue University alone, more than 100 people attended a read-in. The school's president, Mitch Daniels, sent emails while he was governor trying to censor the use of Zinn's work in classrooms. As Sarah Whitmire reports, those emails are what sparked this week's events.
Our president, Mitch Daniels, while he was governor of Indiana, had tried to censor the work of Howard Zinn.
We're just here in solidarity because we feel like it's power in numbers.
The group that gathered Tuesday night wanted to send a message to Purdue President Mitch Daniels and to political leaders that teachers deserve academic freedom.
I want to thank Mitch. Mitch, are you?
Daniels was not at Tuesday's read-in, but a spokesperson issued a statement that said, all viewpoints are welcome on our campus. But Daniels doesn't just consider Zinn's liberal teaching of U.S. history a viewpoint. He calls it misinformation. In emails the Associated Press released this summer, Daniels wrote after learning of Howard Zinn's death, this, quote, terrible anti-American academic has finally passed away. He called Zinn's book, The People's History of the United States, a truly execrable, anti-factual piece of disinformation that misstates American history on every page. In those emails, Daniels sought assurances from his staff that Zinn's history wasn't being used in Indiana classrooms.
The fact that he called it unfactual, or that it wasn't fact, is just completely wrong, because all these things that he mentions in the book really did happen. It's just the perspective that's different. The fact that it's coming from the bottom up rather than from the top down.
There's no disputing Zinn's approach is radical. He even described himself as such. He tells the history of the U.S. through people's viewpoints he says were often ignored, such as slaves and Native Americans.
And they have always used two methods.
Alex Lichtenstein teaches modern U.S. history at IU Bloomington. He encouraged his students to come to Purdue to the read-in. His class is beginning a lesson on anti-war and the civil rights movement, so he says it naturally fit into the schedule.
The entire purpose of the book is to demonstrate that there are many voices in American history, and so to ban it or suppress it or to suggest that these voices should be silenced for young people is completely at odds with Zinn's work and Zinn's ideas and Zinn's purpose in life, and as Zinn himself would have said, completely at odds with American democracy.
In a lot of other countries, you've got the government controlling what people can say. And so academic freedom is just another way of looking at freedom of speech.
Peter Kloosterman is a member of the American Association of University Professors, a group that works to protect academic freedom.
We've known for a long time that freedom of speech is always under attack. Freedom of speech gives people who aren't in power the opportunity to say what they think. And so what we see here is somebody who's got a lot of power trying to take that away from people who have less power.
At the college and university level, a lot of decisions depend on the university administration, and the state doesn't have any authority. But Klusterman says months after the emails were printed, the reason people are still talking about Daniels and attending read-ins is because people in power are trying to get more involved in making decisions about what should be studied in Indiana's classrooms.
There are people who think that elected officials or people in charge of universities are there because they know more and they should be making more decisions.
The head of the National Association of Scholars, which is a network of academics in higher education, wrote an op-ed not long after the Daniels emails were released. He said Daniels was right writing what he did. He said sometimes it's important for politicians to get involved to decide what's appropriate material in a public classroom.
There's been a lot of officials, government officials, the president of Purdue University being one of them, that supports the privatization of schools, and that means the privatization of knowledge. So then my question is, who chooses what we are exposed to? Who chooses what our children are exposed to?
And Sarah Whitmire, who reported on that story, is back with us to join us with more. I want to go back to that last question that you left us with. So who is responsible for what children are learning in the classrooms?
Well, at the university level, a lot of discretion is left up to the faculty members, but with that comes a lot of responsibility. Peter Klusterman, who was in that piece, he said, the faculty have an obligation to present the best research that they know is available on a subject, and if the accuracy of something they use is called into question, they have an obligation to present that in the classroom and let the classroom discuss it and debate it.
Mm-hmm. What about K through 12?
K through 12 is different, and I think when we were talking about Zinn and the Daniels emails, the two have gotten lumped together quite a bit. And Daniels says he was never talking about what's taught at a university level, and he supports academic freedom. But in K through 12 classrooms, he says the state does have a right to talk about the curriculum and set the curriculum. The state sets the standards for K through 12 classrooms, and he says he stands by his decision that Zinn should not be taught in K through 12 classrooms. But for the most part, district administrators decide what's taught, and they work with the faculty, with the teachers to do that. But for the most part, they're the ones who are in charge on the day-to-day level.
Now, we talked with Anthony Arno this week. He's the co-editor of the Zinn publication. And by default, he said the state is largely making the decision about what children are learning because they're placing so many restrictions on teachers, and we have more from him. Let's look at that right now.
I think teachers should need to have the freedom to make those kinds of choices, and as they're pressured more and more to just teach to a test and teach to a core curriculum, unfortunately they have less control over what's going on in their classroom, and so it's harder to bring in those outside voices like Howard's, and I think that's a real shame. I think students will be far richer for being able to engage with Howard's work.
I think it's worth noting that Arno, who worked with Zinn, wasn't even advocating that Zinn's book be the only one taught. He says it should be one of many, and there are many ways to interpret history.
Well, thank you very much, Sarah.
Thanks.
Very interesting. And now for a look at what's making news across the state and region, we now go over to Alex Dierkman for a look at this week's headlines. Hi, Alex.
Hey, Joe. Thank you. 24 schools are now challenging whether the federal government can penalize them for not providing health insurance under the Affordable Care Act. The state of Indiana and 15 school districts originally signed on to the lawsuit last month. The lawsuit alleges the Affordable Care Act does not specifically allow the federal government to impose financial penalties in states that opted to use the federal exchange instead of the state-based health exchange. And it says penalties can't be applied to government employers because that would mean the federal government is taxing a state agency, something outlawed in the 10th Amendment. More schools could still join the suit, but the deadline is the end of the month. And schools aren't the only ones adjusting to the Affordable Care Act. Judging by a crowd this week at a forum in Indianapolis, it's clear uninsured Hoosiers are trying to learn more about their options under the new healthcare exchanges. Dozens of people gathered at a church on the city's northwest side to talk to healthcare representatives and government leaders. Karen Williams' daughter is a single mom with 3 kids. Her daughter is getting dropped from her existing plan and will have to go to the exchanges for coverage. Williams says her daughter is going to end up paying more for less coverage. She blames it on a lack of options in Indiana and the fact that the state did not opt to run its own exchange.
I know that not having the exchange can affect the rates that Hoosiers will have to pay for their insurance, driving those costs up and limiting the choices that we have for health care.
Anthem is the only provider that serves all 92 counties in Indiana, and Regional Vice President Joe Gilbert says Anthem wants competition.
Competition is good for the consumer. It's even good for the insurance companies.
Indiana isn't alone. People across the country are complaining about larger premiums, higher deductibles, and fewer providers to choose from. But officials from the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services say there is still plenty of time for people to figure out their best options. People have to sign up by December 15th if they want their coverage to begin January 1st. The enrollment period extends through March 31st, 2014. Indiana University researchers are forecasting decent economic growth for the state in 2014, but they say that's only because the state has seen subpar growth in the last year. With manufacturing being hit hard in the recession, Indiana has struggled in the last few years.
You know, there's a lot of people in this country who aren't well qualified for the jobs that are growing. If we could get our workforce trained better, educated better, then everybody would be enjoying a higher standard of living.
But economists say Indiana's current unemployment rate of 8.1% is expected to drop to just below 7% next year. And while Indiana's personal income levels are still significantly below the national average, they have been increasing at a faster rate than in previous years. Economists say that's good news, but with looming federal sequesters and the ripple effects of the Affordable Care Act, the state will be in recovery mode for at least a couple more years. A man convicted of murdering a Bloomington Pizza X delivery driver was sentenced this week to 73 years in prison. James Finney shot Adam Sarnecki in a Pizza X parking lot where he worked nearly 2 years ago. A jury last month found Finney guilty of murder and 2 counts of possessing a handgun without a license. The judge gave Finney the maximum sentence for each count, saying he was likely to reoffend. Depending on Finney's behavior and whether he completes counseling or education programs while in prison, he could be released in as little as 32.5 years. Half of Hoosier children younger than 9 are living in low-income households. That's according to data from the Annie E. Casey Foundation's Kids Count released this week. In 2005, a look at the same population showed 43% were living in households that made less than 200% of the poverty level. The report also found that only 30% of the low-income 3- and 4-year-olds in Indiana attend some kind of preschool. That compares to nearly half of all higher-income children. Indiana is one of only a handful of states that does not offer state-funded preschool. After it did not pass legislation to create a state-funded pre-kindergarten pilot program last session, the legislature instead created the Early Learning Advisory Committee. Among other duties, the group's tasked with setting parameters for early education grants and recommending education initiatives to the legislature. And DePauw University and Wabash College are joining the fight against an amendment that would amend the state's constitution to define marriage as only between a man and a woman. The schools are joining with Indiana University and several companies in becoming members of Freedom Indiana, a bipartisan coalition created to oppose the marriage amendment. In a joint statement, the 2 college presidents said the amendment would make it difficult to attract talented faculty and staff to their campuses. The Indiana legislature already voted once in favor of the amendment. And if they do so again this session, Joe, the proposed constitutional change will be placed on the ballot next November.
Okay, thank you, Alex. Coming up next on Indiana Newsdesk. Why girls fall behind their male counterparts in math and science when they reach high school, and how some girls are breaking the stereotype. Our education team will tell you which Indiana students raised eyebrows across the country with their gains on national reading and math exams. And a new haven for hikers and birdwatchers in Indiana. These stories right after this.
PBS kicks off the weekends with Charlie Rose and America's top newsmakers on his new series, Charlie Rose, The Week.
Some people say, well, Obama was this raving liberal before, now he's, Dick Cheney.
Recap the week's biggest stories and Charlie's best interviews.
You feel there's this incredible synergy between the audience and the performer, and time slows down.
And get a look at the week ahead. Charlie Rose, The Week. Check local listings.
The fact that PBS is the most trusted media outlet in the country means a great deal to me. We live now in the most multicultural, multiracial, multi-ethnic America ever. There are a lot of voices in this country that need to be heard. I think that my job is to help Americans re-examine the assumptions that they hold, to expand their inventory of ideas, and hopefully to introduce Americans to each other. And we take that challenge seriously every day.
Welcome back to Indiana Newsdesk. I'm Joe Wren. A recent study shows girls in Indiana lagging behind boys on science and math scores in high school. The gap doesn't exist in middle school, and as Josh and Lynn reports, researchers blame a variety of factors for the discrepancy.
Spacecraft, mission control. I have a message for the
It's 1 o'clock in the afternoon, and these 6th graders from Our Lady of Mount Carmel Catholic School in Indianapolis are being launched into space.
Mission control, this is spacecraft. I have a message for the entire crew. Over.
A recent study from St. Mary's College found girls at the age of these budding astronauts perform better than boys in math and science. But then something happens, and by 9th grade, they start to lag significantly behind their male peers. The study showed girls scoring as much as 39 points lower than boys on the math and science portions of the SAT. There were similar gaps on the ACT and AP exams.
In looking at education, one of the things that we saw was, and this is not a new discovery, that there is a drop in interest, especially math and science, as girls transition from middle school to high school.
The million-dollar question is why. The St. Mary's study took a look at poverty, mental health, and violence as possible factors. Other studies have looked at MRIs, international testing data, infant attention spans, you name it. All of the research shows that there's not a single reason, but rather a lot of contributing factors. One reason that gets repeated a lot is the stereotype threat, a phenomenon first studied among black students in the early 1990s.
So in this case, if we've grown up, our mothers telling us or society telling us we're not as good at math as the boys are, we go into a room to take a math exam, and it is going to impact how we do.
At Perry Meridian High School on the southeast side of Indianapolis, the robotics team is preparing for next year's competition. Of 40 team members, 8 are girls. They attribute the drop in interest among their peers to a simple lack of awareness of math and science.
They think it's intimidating because they don't know, and they think I would never be able to do that. I used to think that too.
They don't necessarily understand everything that we do, and once explained, it's like, oh, I should have joined that. I should have been involved as well.
Becky Combs is one of the team leaders. Like Stoll and Gilbert, she was also intimidated, but she suffered a knee injury and couldn't play on the basketball team that year. She joined the robotics team instead.
It's sometimes challenging, but a lot of the boys, I feel like, respect the girls. A lot of them actually come to me and ask me if they have a problem because I run the mill and I'm so diverse with the tools that I can explain things that they may not know how to do.
All 3 girls plan to continue down the science path as they enter college. They'll be part of Indiana's growing science, technology, engineering, and math, or STEM, field. But national numbers show women only hold about a quarter of STEM jobs, according to the U.S. Census Bureau.
I think that men and women look at problems differently, and I believe, I think that the opportunities are equal, but I think the way people look at problems are different, and that's good. That gives you diversity of thought and good diversity on finding solutions.
Which brings us back to the girls in space, executing plans and problem solving to bring their team safely to the surface of the moon. Cindy Meyer, a longtime science educator, thinks emphasis on math and science needs to happen even earlier than middle school, going all the way back to elementary grades.
I also am wondering if we need to break this mold of one way to teach math and science. Maybe our girls need to learn math and science differently than some boys. Seeing them become more confident, seeing them be inspired, seeing the connection between this one-time job that they did in relationship to their education and what they're doing in the classroom. That's exciting.
I'm joined by Girls Inc. of Monroe County Executive Director Kristi McCann for more on this story. We talked a lot about in what we just saw about the scores, but the big difference between boys and girls. But there's also some more grim statistics in that St. Mary's study, referring to how girls struggle with depression, body image, weight gain, and even sexual violence. Would you agree with that in that study?
Absolutely, I would agree with what their findings have been towards girls, yes.
And why is that?
I think a lot of it is how society's images have been portrayed on girls. And that's one of the things that Girls Incorporated strives for, is to give them an environment that they feel comfortable trying new things. And we really focus on those STEM topics and giving them those exposures at the science and engineering and mathematics for them.
Are there other key issues that girls are facing nowadays that we didn't cover here?
Well, a lot of the media influence that is obviously affecting girls early on, all the way through high school. And I think that how we interpret the media, and we work at educating girls on how to handle the impressions from media that they are getting and how society puts those pressures upon them. And we try to influence them in positive choices and choices that sometimes girls aren't offered, such as the news article mentioned.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
What are some of those maybe warning signs that parents, educators can pick up on from some of these girls who are having trouble, that they may need help?
Well, some of it might be just in their own self-image and maybe their physical appearance, or they just are struggling with school. They are not wanting to partake in different activities. Those are some warning signs that parents should be aware of on if they just are not wanting to get participatory in different things. And that's one of the things that we try to focus on with girls, is getting them into different activities that are a little different than maybe what they're offered in the school system, or that the parents may be offering them and talking with them at home. It's just a nice environment for the girls to have, to talk about what they want to talk about and try different things hands-on. And that's important for girls, to be able to have those experiences outside of just the school system. So parents should be aware that there are a lot of different opportunities out there for their girls.
Okay, well, thank you very much for being here today. We appreciate your perspective on this very important topic.
Thank you.
State Superintendent Glenda Ritz brought her legal challenge against the education panel she chairs before a judge this week. Our state impact education reporter Kyle Stokes has been following the case. Kyle, what's the latest?
Well, Joe, we got word very late this afternoon that Glenda Ritz's lawsuit against members of the State Board of Education is now out of court. A Marion County Circuit Court judge has dismissed the case, saying that she was unauthorized to file it in the first place, effectively siding with an argument that was made by the state's Attorney General. Representatives for Greg Zeller had said because State Superintendent Glenda Ritz is an elected state official, only the Attorney General is able to represent her in court. Now, the ruling that the judge issued late this afternoon does not deal with the merits of Ritz's case, which isn't really about whether she can file in court at all. It's more related to whether or not state board members were breaking open meetings laws by meeting effectively behind her back. She contends to craft a letter to legislative leaders to try and request help for grading A through F performance ratings for schools. That argument was not addressed by Marion County Circuit Court Judge Louis Rosenberg in his ruling today, so we'll have much more on this on our website, stateimpactindiana.org. Of course, it comes as part of a much broader, bigger story about tensions between Ritz and State Board of Education members as they clash on effectively just about every issue, and including at today's state board meeting, there was another squabble over the agenda. But after that squabble was over, state board members and Glenda Ritz approved a timeline for releasing Indiana's A through F performance ratings for schools. Essentially, schools will see their preliminary ratings starting on November 15th, and they'll have a chance to appeal their grade before the state board finalizes their score at a special meeting in late December. An earlier Department of Education memo proposed releasing the grades publicly at first at the end of November. Now, we got the results of the national exams used to compare the academic performance of students across the country this week, and take a look at this chart that we have here. Indiana fourth graders did really well. It might not look like much on this graph of the scores over this past decade, but you see this red line right here? That jump among Indiana fourth graders' reading scores is bigger than almost any other state. Only 3 other states have more 4th graders proficient in math. 8th graders also saw more modest gains, but nationally scores edged up only slightly, and achievement gaps between white and minority students remain. 4 Indiana school districts went to voters this past Tuesday asking them to raise their own taxes to fund the schools, but in 3 of those 4 districts, the voters rejected that request. In Muncie, that could end up costing the district its school bus fleet. District officials say without a referendum from the voters, they did not have enough property tax revenues to continue paying for transportation. Muncie may also actually have to close some school buildings, but officials say the savings wouldn't come quick enough. Joe?
Okay, thank you very much for that report. And if you are looking for something to do this week, head outdoors. A piece of land north of Martinsville that could have been developed is open to the public as a nature preserve. As soon as Robert Meyer heard this site of 55 acres was up for sale, he knew he wouldn't have much time to save it from bulldozers and construction workers. The land off State Road 67 was marketed as a prime development area.
It was rare, and it could very easily have been developed and taken over by someone else, and so we had to act quickly, and it was wonderful that our family could help out.
The Central Indiana Land Trust was already protecting 14 acres, so in all, 69 acres are part of the preserve. And the Central Indiana Land Trust is going to open a second preserve this coming week, this time in southern Johnson County.
Well, it'd be nice to have somewhere to go while the weather's still nice.
It should be a great weekend. That's the end of this program, but our work continues online as we cover the news in southern Indiana throughout the week at WTIUnews.org. Have a great weekend.
Indiana Newsdesk is made possible in part by Hoosier Energy, providing electricity to southern and central Indiana electric cooperatives and their member customers. Information at hepn.com. And by WTIU members. Thank you.